Hey folks, welcome back. In this video, we're going to continue with tent maintenance. I'm going to show you how I put this rainfly up, and we're also going to put a stove jack in it and any other little small tasks that need to be accomplished, so stick around. So a friend of mine gave me this ancient stove jack. So one of the first things I'm going to have to do is take a ball peen hammer and kind of straighten out all the bends and get it back to as good of a condition as I can get it to. This stove jack right here cost me 75 bucks with the silicone ring and whatnot. So I'm going to try and save a few bucks and use that old ancient one on the fly, because it'll likely have to come off and get put back on a different fly as time develops. So if I'm going to be moving metal around, one of the first things that I want to do is set up my workstation. And for this, I'm going to use my stump anvil. So if you don't know what a stump anvil is, this one is just a chunk of railroad track that's been ground down to a spike on that main beam. So I just drive it into a stump, and then I have a nice solid surface that I can do any light metal smithing on. So what I've done already before this point was I guide out all the corners and then let the tarp hang on the tent for a couple of days so it kind of stretches to where it wants to. You can see here, I drew those two lines together, knotted it, and then ran it out to its own single stake in the center. And that keeps the peak from sliding backwards. And I did the same thing on the back side. So those two come down into a knot and then they all go to this one single stake. Now the tarp I got was 12 feet wide by 18 feet long. I would have liked to have a 14 foot wide so I'd get a little overhang on the edges, but that didn't happen. They didn't have it. But you can see what I did was when I tied these ends up, I tied them both in the tent and the tarp so I can get the full stretch on the tarp from corner to corner the way it's going to set, so that when I draw my stove hole, it's in the most perfect position. All I have to do to line it back in is to line up all those four corner holes, and everything should fall into place perfectly, even if the tarp gets a little stretched one way or another. Now that one corner bracket on the tent had that extra piece sticking out, so I made another 2x4. It was the right length for this tarp, and used my one spare corner bracket that I had, and that one sits out front. And those beams, they can be cut on site and then stored for years at a time. What I did with mine was I just lean them up against a tree and they'll last for years. In fact, these two poles are from my parachute teepee shelter video that I did a few years ago. So that'll give you an idea how long these will last if you take care of them and prop them up against a tree. So if you do have to cut them at your hunting camp or someplace where you go yearly, you're liable to get 3 or 4 years worth of use out of them if you take care of them when you leave camp. So now, since I know that the tarp is squared up to all the corners, and it's going to stretch and it's going to flex a little bit, but it's essentially in a real easy, repeatable spot. All I have to do is match up each of those corner holes with the tarp in the tent, and everything will line up the way it's supposed to. So I can go ahead and draw my circle where I'm going to cut it out, and then I have to peel that tarp off the top and take it off to the side and put the stove hole in it. So now if you're wondering why all the effort to set up this tent in my yard, it's been set up multiple times through the season, and I have different lines for it. I have different ways to set it up. I have one that's just a big wide come along that I can run the tent up on and then just guy it out, and it doesn't need a frame at all. One of the other options, I can make a frame out of just timbers in the forest, and all of that comes with different pickets and different ropes and all that kind of stuff. And by the end of the year, everything just kind of gets thrown into one bag. So starting out the new year, I usually set it up on the frame, go through all of my equipment, do any repairs that need to get done. My stove needs to be painted again, and various other little things that have to be done. But I do that right here in the yard because I have my shop and I have quick access to tools. And once I get everything done, then I can pack it down into its portable mode, and that's how I'll take it out most of the time. But that way I can see how much space it takes up. It gives me time to organize it according to what I like and what I think is usable and what I want to be accessible to me. And then I can build, once I get all the repairs for everything done, I can build a toolkit based on what I expect might fail in the future. And the next thing I have to do is I do have to sew up that hole in the back, and there's a couple of worn out little tiny holes on the door that I'm going to go ahead and sew up as well. But I have to get some canvas to repair it, and you think it'd be easy to come by, but I don't want to buy a $100 canvas tarp just to cut it up for patches. So right now my wife is actually out thrift store shopping, and I told her to keep an eye out for an old pair of light colored, like Carhartt pants or Duluth pants or something along those lines that's real heavy duty canvas, so that I can cut them up and use them for repairs. And I think she found a pair, so we might get to that in the next video. But in this one, I really wanted to get that stove jack put up, set my stove up, and make sure the holes and everything line up. It's a little too late to do anything about it, but I'll kind of start over the course of the next couple days just laying it out the way I want to, and then I'll eliminate all the chaff, and I'll set those into little kits. Like I'll have my gas stove in one kit, and then I'll have my wood stove in another, and I'll have my kitchen in another. So I'll decide what components I want to bring with me depending on how I'm going. So if I'm going out and I'm going to take the frame's going to contain all the corner brackets, all the lines, all the pickets, everything I need for just the frame. If I decide I don't want the frame, I can leave that entire bag and I don't have to worry about it. Camp kitchen, tables, cots, chairs, everything is its own little individual kit. Then I will grab whatever necessary kits go with the tent to make it livable. It's one thing to go out and experiment in the forest and do some survival training and have a little bit of fun, but suffering gets old. It really does. When you've done it enough and you slept out in the rain and froze your feet off, and when you do that stuff enough, it just gets old. So there's a certain comfort in having something like this, that if you really want to go out and spend some serious time out in the woods, weeks or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or indefinitely, then you have the equipment to go set up an actual little homestead and just enjoy being out in the woods for a while. This is what makes that possible and makes it comfortable. So you can sleep when it's warm, you can cook good food. Don't get me wrong, I like tent camping, I like survival camping, I like ninja camping, I like all forms of outdoor activities, but there's just a time when you just want to go back there, kick it, enjoy the nature, and not have to stress too much about anything. And in that case, that's when you bring a wall tent and you really lay it out. Like if my mission is to go hunting, I don't want to have to mess around with trying to start a campfire to cook my dinner. I want to just fire up the stove and cook my dinner and have a good dinner and have a few laughs. Having power is a real nice thing too, when you could run a little string of lights and charge your phone and charge your camera batteries and do all those sort of things out in the woods. It makes it real comfortable to just kind of enjoy being there, because you don't have to stress over any of the comforts. And comforts, they have their place. Anybody that says they don't like to be comfortable, that they want to suffer, if you live in a house, you're a liar. Unless you're living in a lean-to. And I know people that do, that essentially just bum around and live in the woods, and that's cool, but even they can appreciate comfort. So I guess my next step is to set up the stove, line it up with the stove hole, figure out how that's going to do, and then I can go through and stake and guy out the rest of this tent. Well, as you can see, the stove lines up to the hole perfectly. That's awesome. I'm really glad that I didn't have to buy another tarp. The beauty of this setup is if I decide I don't want to take the stove, all I have to do is flip the tarp around to the other side. It puts the hole over there, and then this hole is covered up by the tarp. No harm, no foul. So if I don't want to bring it out in the summertime, I don't have to bring it. Once again, I want to thank you for sticking around to the very end, and I hope that you really enjoyed that video. If you're getting any use out of my videos, please consider subscribing and ringing that notifications bell so that you get notified anytime that I have a new upload. As a reminder, you can start a conversation with me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Survivology101. Feel free to share this video all across the social interweb media thing to anybody you think might be able to get some use out of it. And lastly, lean into those comments. Tell me what you think. And if I don't see you in the comments, then I'll see you on the next one.